trying to test the fuel injection, which I don't know very much about at all. The Scout will start and run. Drove all the way home from Maryland with no issues, but it won't start cold unless you leave the key in and leave the key on for like literally a minute. I've been bouncing around all kinds of different ideas. Initially we had some parasitic draw and maybe a battery issue, so I had already replaced that, fixed the parasitic draw. The fuel filter was dirty. I changed the fuel filter, thinking, you know, one of the issues clearly I'm getting is that I'm not having fuel injecting by the injectors. Whenever I try to start the Scout. Most likely that's an electrical issue at some point here. One of the other things I did was change the starter. It was turning over, but it sounded labored. It sounded slow. And my theory was that I already had a starter here, so it wasn't a big deal. There's no cost. The theory was that maybe that starter was starting to go. It was causing extra draw. I don't know. One of the troubleshooting steps is to test the battery voltage when cranking and test the injectors when cranking. And there is over a 1 volt drop between the two, which is concerning. I think that might indicate an electrical issue, although it's still just over a little over 9 volts, I think, still at the injectors, which I think that's okay. I'm just continuing to troubleshoot. I do have a fuel pressure test kit. I'm going to try that at some point here. The other thing I was just looking at was the battery ground strap here. I pulled it off and it's, you know, it needs cleaned up. I don't think that's the issue. I mean, it could be, but we're gonna find out. I'm gonna clean that up, give it a shot, but I'm just trying to rule things out right now. All right, I already did the surface here, the mating surface on the other side. So we shall see. I'm not expecting anything, but let's see. No luck. On to the next thing. Get distracted with all kinds of things that aren't important. I guess it's kind of important. I did lose my lost the turn signals and the 4-ways, the flashers again. And I went through and every single bulb was burned out. So I was troubleshooting all the relays and everything, didn't expect the bulbs to be burned out. So while I was doing that, I realized that the marker lights on here, some of the bases and some of the connections inside were kind of bad, and I had an extra set sitting right there. So those were, I think those were a little bit better than what was on here, so I swapped those out last night. Everything's working. That seems like it fixed all of that, but I'm a little curious why I lost all 4 of my turn signals. The only thing I could think maybe is that the fuse is wrong. Maybe I should have burned the fuse up and didn't. I'm not quite sure, so let's keep an eye on that. So here I'm trying to perform a fuel pressure test. The problem I'm running into is that the adapter that came with the kit for TBI is fairly large, and I don't have enough clearance between the throttle body and the fuel line to put this in place because it keeps hitting the EGR. And the EGR is already capped off and not being used, but I don't have a block off plate, which would probably be something I would need in order to use this. So I wasn't really convinced at this point that the problem was with fuel pressure, because I was either getting fuel spray or pulse, or I was not. There was no in between, and it was spraying pretty heavily, so it didn't seem like it was a scenario where, you know, where the fuel pressure might be a little low or something. It was just all or nothing. So I'm getting pretty frustrated at this point with not being able to fit this in here, and I moved on. Yeah, I'm editing episode 3 right now, and I realized that I don't have any footage for the fix for fuel injection. So this ended up being the problem. This is the fuel injection module that was in the Scout, GM fuel injection module nothing all that special. It's fairly cheap replacement. I think from the parts stores it might be like $50. From Amazon, that one, the one I got, was $18. And immediately I started getting fuel spray, I got spark, everything seemed to work once I put that in. However, after a couple days of starting the Scout and moving it around, I ran into a problem where it wouldn't start again. So that was pretty frustrating, but what I decided to do was, it did eventually get started, and it started up after that okay. So I'm not quite sure what it is. I did order another fuel module, the one that's in the Scout right now. It was a little better rated one, a little bit more expensive, but I'm just gonna see if there's any problems with that second fuel module. If there are, then I know there's another problem that I gotta track down. So I think the next project, now that the ignition is working pretty consistently, got to pull this hub back apart and get back to the knuckle. There's only 7 bolts on there. I broke 1 bolt, and I bought a kit from BNC Extreme to replace those. So I'm going to punch those out. So I've got some doors here that I need to deal with. They're kind of in the way. I want to break them down and see what's good out of them, at least the glass and hopefully the wing windows, regulators. But the door skins, whenever I stripped this Scout in the junkyard, I thought for a minute that doors were in a lot better shape than what they were, but the doors really aren't salvageable. There's no value there. So I'm going to strip those down, see what I can get out of them. All right, if you haven't taken a wing window out before, fairly simple. Just a couple 1/2-inch bolts here that are plugged. There's a plug here you'll have to pry out with another 1/2-inch bolt. And then if I recall correctly, there's a channel here with 4 screws, Phillips head screws that have to come out. And then I'd already removed this previously, but there's 2 Phillips head screws here. And then this should pull up. So there's the wing window. I think. Oh, that looks broken, doesn't it? Through there. This is intact. Usually those are the 2 places where these get bad. The actual rubber on it is not very good, but I've seen a lot worse. It might be pretty usable. I don't know. I'm gonna set it aside. Yeah, unfortunately, I think this thing sat in the weather a little too long. These windows all rotted out there. This thing's full of rust. I don't know. And I'll pull it out and see, but pretty rough. I don't want to work in this rain. I don't need to. It's not fun, so I'm gonna do what I can here. This wing window, I just want to kind of figure out if it's any good. There we go. I'm concerned that this is broke underneath here. I'm not 100% sure what it's supposed to look like. Yeah. Oh yeah. The whole thing's just bending. Okay, so I think that rules that out as far as being better than what I have, but there's still some value there. Yeah, not the best. This is the regulator. I have had one of these break, and I think the replacements are like $250. But I fixed, what broke? I think it was the gear in the window winder here. The internal gear in there, I think, broke, and I ended up taking this all apart and welding a tooth onto it, and it's worked ever since. But having some spare parts to work with would be nice. All right, so there's not a whole lot left in here besides some of the door lock assembly stuff. I'm gonna pull that stuff out, pull the door handle off. Again, this is mostly junk, but if it's better junk than what you have, then it's an improvement. And it's just that simple. So, not gonna lie, I got these doors basically for free. Well, I stripped the Scout for $300, went back, got more parts for $25. For that $300, well, for the $25, I got the two doors, and everything else that I could pick off of it, which wasn't much, but there's a handful of things. But the $500, or I'm sorry, the $300 that I spent on this Scout originally, when I was eyeballing it, was really the doors and this transmission. The regulator should come out pretty easily now. Jeez. Yeah. It was just that easy. Quick update. Pulled this and wire wheeled and sandblasted all of the paint and glue off. Just all this glue. It looked like this before I pulled it. And I just gave it a quick spray with some like cheap rattle can paint. The thought being that whenever I'm ready to paint this, I can sandblast this paint off like extremely easy, much easier than the paint that came on it. So this will protect it for now, but at least it gets all that glue off, because I think that's going to be a pretty big job trying to get all of that off of there. And then I'll epoxy prime it later. Once it's done, I'll get both sides of this and epoxy prime it, and then it'll be good until I'm ready to actually shoot color. Okay, so I've taken out the there were 3 out of the 4 of the screws were in the front. Everything, the only thing that seemed a little strange is they seemed like they were on a little bit of an angle, so I'm not sure if there's any kind of an alignment thing here. I can't remember. I thought they went straight up, but they were angled in. I'll just look at the other video, but took those out, and I think everything's off the side. There were only a couple in here. I've got more hardware for this. These Scout tops just have a rail on each side with I think 5 bolts holding down the top, and then 4 in the front, and that's it. There were only 2 on either side back here. It's no problem, I have more. And the bolt holes seem like they were lining up. I mean, that's always a concern. It was an issue on my other Scout, you know, trying to make sure all that stuff lines up well. So the only other thing for taking the top off is disconnecting this light back here. We actually just added this light recently, and it's just kind of a makeshift plug there, so that's unplugged. All right, so in theory I should be able to just lift up on this with my back like this, and it does come right up. So now the front seemed a little sticky, so I might have to go play around with that. And then what I need to do is put something under here, but I don't want to lift it up too much because I need to get it out of my garage, and I already have to disconnect my garage door to get it out with the top on. So what I would typically do is put a 2x4, 2 2x4s across to hold the top up, and then I can pull over to my porch and ratchet strap it up with those 2x4s and a couple extra ratchet straps, and that works pretty well. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to get out of my garage if I do that. Back up in the front, and this one concerns me a little bit. Let's see if I can push this up. I don't want to force anything too crazy. Yeah, I can hear it sticking. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Yeah, that gets pretty sticky. I wonder. See, there's a little bit of this body's not perfect by any means. It's pretty good. This front's pretty actually really good. I'm pretty excited about that. There's not a whole lot in the front that I'll have to deal with. The windshield frame's pretty good. There's been some repairs, but you know, they look pretty decent. The doors aren't terrible. I've got actually, I think, at least one extra door. So I think it's a driver's side door. It may be in better shape than that one, but they're still pretty decent. The rockers I want to redo before we paint it, but everything's fairly solid with the rockers for now. It's just, if I'm going to do all the work of repainting it, I'll probably do completely new rockers and see about the floors. All of that stuff's fairly solid though right now. What concerns me is, and what I was just, why I was bringing that up, is this popped up and back, right? So there's some pressure on that. And if I look over here, I see this gap here, and that's a pretty big gap. And it is definitely smaller at the bottom. And this quarter here was replaced, but there are some signs, let me grab a light, there's some signs of some other, you know, maybe bigger issues. And that might be one of them right there. Yeah, so this gap got bigger when I took that off. So this, what's happening is this bed is very poorly supported at this point. It's just been some of the metal's gone, some things have been there's been some fixes over the years, and you can see right there, I don't think this is supposed to be folded up in there. I think this is actually supposed to be sitting up a little bit higher. So I think what I'm going to end up having to do as I redo this bed is actually lift up on this back some. I'll replace this piece here all the way across, and that should seat this. I think that's going to seat this higher than what it was, and I think that's going to take up this gap up here. Although this what is this called, a B pillar, this, you know, I'll have to take a look at that. I'm not quite sure what else I'll run into there, but all of that stuff's going to have to get tweaked. And this is a reason why you don't take the tops off of Scouts unless they have good body mounts, and the wedges are good, and these body mounts here are good. You can run into a lot bigger problems. But I kind of expected that. That did move a little bit more. That door's gotten a little sticky now. I wonder if that other door's going to have a problem. And that explains why these screws were on an angle. It was all sucking up. So I bet if I had a good jacking point under that, the rear cross member that goes across the body tub, I bet I could close some of this up. I think that all just needs re-supported. So after I take this top off, I'll have to be very mindful about that. I'm just gonna pull this weather stripping for now. Okay, that's good news. The wrong thing. Okay, so at least from what I can tell right here, this looks surprisingly good, which I think this was replaced not that long ago, but there's a filler piece here. You can see it moving. This piece looks good. Actually looks really rust free. He probably replaced that whenever he did the quarters. So I mean, I can't really get to the gutter that's underneath of that, but there's basically just a channel underneath of this that tends to rot out. So I think that this side's probably good. I'm going to check on the other side. I would suspect if there's going to be a problem, it's going to be over here, because this is all original. All right, just lifting my back in there. Okay, I forgot to do the weather strip. That's okay. Come on. All right. boy, I'm excited about that. The piece that fits in the channel over here also looks really good. Looks really good. Okay, I've got some straps here. I've got 3 straps right now. This is still kind of temporary. I think once I pull out, I'll strap this a little better. I've got the straps going directly against the body, against the top, which I don't like. I would rather do something like this and build a frame for it to sit on, which I'll probably do. I just want to try to get this kind of as proof of concept. So I see a couple issues. One is the roll bar potentially hitting here, so I'll have to watch that. And the second is that the top itself, let me get back here. Okay. The top itself is already touching here, so it doesn't have any room to lift. And it's just barely clearing right now. So, come back. So I think that's good enough for what I want to do today, but in the future I'll probably shift this forward a little bit and just make sure that everything's gonna clear. Look, nothing like taking the top off in the snow. It seems only appropriate. All right, I hate the cold. I'm not going to stick here, but I think now it's going to fit in my garage without having to take the garage door off the track. So I'll go play around with that. Let's see. We'll find out together how bad this is. This cap here looks great, so that's kind of nice. I'll have to buy that. Pretty good. Pretty good. Doesn't look rotty at all. This happens. These are all blown out on my other Scout. So I might need to reinforce those while we're in here. But no, that's great. That looks really clean. Honestly, I'm surprised even this quarter looks... It was starting to rust here, but even that quarter looks pretty decent. So, all right, let's go see the other side. That probably saves me at least like, I don't know, $120, $150, I think, on per side for patch panels. And I'm trying to keep the budget much lower on this Scout. Just because I spent more on the first Scout for things that maybe I could have fixed, or things I don't know. I didn't do too bad on it. Doing all the work myself was huge. Okay. But I am learning ways to do this a lot cheaper. So, all right. First glance looks good. This piece here looks great. Just a little bit of tweaking there. No big deal. Just nothing there. Wow, this side looks great. This is good news. I'll clean this up whenever I get into this metal work, but I can start emptying out this bed and start really eyeballing what's needed. All right, so where are we going? What do we need to do this winter? And what are the goals? So the Green Scout has 2 projects. Both of them are cheap, but they're fairly complicated. One is valve seals. I get a puff of smoke on startup that's sometimes pretty heavy, and it's just annoying. So I do have the valve seals. They were like $6, but I've never replaced them. That's a pretty big job, so we'll see how that goes. The second is, if you look in here behind the valley pan, you'll see some fluid build up in there. I'll find coolant in there from time to time, and I was watching a video from Sean Barber, Anything Scout, and he mentioned that there are freeze plugs in the intake manifold, and they'll start to weep, and that's where you get that. So I have a feeling that I'm going to need to get those freeze plugs replaced, and that's a big job. Again, cheap if you do it yourself, but you've got to pull the intake manifold, so it's a pretty big job, and I have no experience doing that. So that'll be interesting, and I'll film it, and you guys can see me bumble through it. But anyway, for the Green Scout, that's really it. It's in pretty good shape otherwise. For Hank, just got the top off. I'm just starting to work on the bed. This quarter's going to go, the inner quarter panel. There's a whole bunch of metal underneath here. All of the structure and support back here. Those will be the upcoming videos probably. I'm going to have to do some alignment for the body. I'll have to probably rebuild hinges. I've got a set of hinges sitting here that I can rebuild. But these doors will need to be realigned. So there's a bunch of work there. Got to do some little things like front brake calipers, brake lines. That stuff is due before we go on a trip. And other than that, I mean, if I got all of that done, got the hardtop back on, and was able to drive it some before Nationals this year, I think I'd be fairly happy. But if, depending on how far we get, I might look at doing this tranny swap, because I really want these 2 Scouts to be very different. The whole idea when getting another Scout was to have the knowledge to be able to do this stuff, have some of the spare parts, but not have the same experience. So this one's always going to stay at original ride height. It's going to stay as a soft top. It's pretty much done. I don't really want to mess with it too much. This one will always be lifted. It'll mostly have a hard top on it. I'll have, I might pull the hard top off here and there, but otherwise it'll remain as a hard top. I'd like to do air conditioning, so that's a future piece of work there. That would be super nice to have. And transmission, right? So These both have the same Chrysler TorqueFlite 727 transmission, and it's a great transmission. In the Green Scout, I'm super happy with it. It's what I'm used to, and no complaints there. Hank's got the transmission shift's kind of hard. I don't know if there's a shift kit. I don't know what the difference is. You know, it's a whole different experience driving these two different Scouts, right? This one's got 63,000 original miles. This one's probably 110. I don't know for sure. It's been lifted. It's, you know, it's a very different feel. Green Scout has the 304, the smaller V8. This has the 345 with fuel injection. So there's a lot different about these two Scouts. But I do like the idea of having a 4-speed or a manual transmission again. It'd be neat to have that experience. So I would definitely like to utilize that at some point, and I need a few parts for that. I do have a rear drive shaft because the drive shaft links are different. I will need a front drive shaft, I think. I'm not 100% sure what the length difference is on those. I need brake pads and stuff like that, clutch pad. Pressure plate and clutch and flywheel. So I thought that was the wrong size pressure plate and clutch, but it's not. I was talking to Super Scout the other day, and they mentioned since it came off of a 77, even though it was a 4-cylinder, a 196 that it came off of, by 77 they used 11-inch clutches, I believe, across the board. So that's good. I'll still have to get it rebuilt, so I'm not sure how much that helps. It's still good. The flywheel will definitely have to be replaced because a 4-cylinder flywheel and an 8-cylinder flywheel are balanced differently and they can't be reused. So anyway, that stuff's all available. I can get all that. And then, you know, there's just some little bits and pieces for the linkage. A couple things will be replaced. I think there's a little bit of wiring, not very much. And then I think there's one little difference with the Hamilton fuel injection. So I think all that stuff's pretty well doable. We'll see how far we get. All right, we're gonna wrap this one up here. Coming up, I think we'll have a lot of the bed work. I've already started cutting out the bed here. I've got to run to Super Scout and pick up a full 1-piece bed and a quarter and all the other metal work. So I think that'll be fun. There'll be some content there. If there's anything you want to see, let me know. I'm probably going to do a video at some point here with the first start on the Green Scout. I do have a video of that, but I really just have a lot of pictures. I can kind of walk through that. I think that would actually be worthy of a video, but you know, it's not going to be the best content, but I think I'd like to put it out there. So you might see that in the future. Anyway, regardless, if you like what you're seeing, please like and subscribe. This is fun.